And welcome back, everyone, to the Pokemon Team Creation Series. And today's Pokemon Team Creation Series suggestion comes to us from Rainbow Prism, who asked the question, what is Shrek's Pokemon team? Shrek has recently been able to come back into the zeitgeist pretty well. I mean, he's always been around. The memes with Shrek has always existed. The series has been pretty beloved. Some of the films are better than others. 1 and 2, I think, are pretty. 2 is probably one of the best sequels to any comedy or anime film ever. 3 is 4 is pretty good, and they've now confirmed there will be a 5th one. And then with Puss in Boots, that helped bring him back into the pop culture zeitgeist a bit more. So Shrek has always been a character that we've really loved and enjoyed. But the question does become, what is the Pokemon team of Shrek? So this actually wasn't that difficult. This is one of the easier ones I've had it on. It wasn't that difficult, but I did still have to think of certain things. And right out the gate, you cannot have Shrek without his loyal donkey. But then what Pokemon do you have? Well, luckily we have a donkey, and that's Mudbray. Mudbray is a donkey. Now, it evolves into a horse, Mudsdale, a Clydesdale horse, but Bray is the sound a donkey actually makes. Is a donkey-based Pokemon. It's the only donkey currently we have. So this makes perfect sense. Add on the fact it's a ground type. It's got mud caked on its body, and Shrek is an ogre who loves to wallow in mud. So this actually works out very well on his team. And if you want to get technical, you can then say, if you want to go to Shrek 2 team, you can evolve Donkey into Mudsdale, and that would be the only version of him that actually has a Mudsdale on his team. Technically speaking, I could do a different team for each version of Shrek, but I will not do that. Because long and short of it, there'd be very few changes, because a lot of these would stay the same. Another one of Shrek's best friends is Puss in Boots. Now, Puss in Boots is a little bit trickier, as we do have multiple cat-based Pokemon. However, I went with Florigato. It is a Pokemon that comes from Spain, where Puss in Boots originally originates from. It's clearly based, at least partially, in design to Puss in Boots. Sprigatito and Meowscarada are definitely not, but Florigato definitely has a little bit of a Puss in Boots inspiration. Now, granted, Meowth could probably substitute on this team as well for Puss in Boots due to the Meowth we got in the anime. But if you're going to ask me which one I go with, I'm probably going to lean more towards Florigato. Again, it's from Paldea, which is a Spain-based region where Puss in Boots basically originates from. It is the middle stage. It stands upright on 2 feet. I think it's actually roughly Puss's size, roughly. It just has a bit more of a Puss feature to it. Although I will admit, it also kind of looks like Kitty Softpaws a little bit, so you could make an argument on who it's really being based off here. And it carries a weapon. Now, granted, its weapon is a yo-yo, but it still carries a weapon like Puss does. So ultimately, I would go with Florigato. I could see at least a minor argument if you're talking about maybe a cat-based Pokemon that uses a weapon, going with, say, Berserker from Galar, but that's more of a Viking than anything else. But I guess in theory you could do that. Anyway, so now we got that out there, we also have to deal with the big fact here, that Shrek is an ogre. He has layers like an onion, but he is an ogre, and you need an ogre Pokemon. Now, up until literally the last DLC, we never had an ogre-based Pokemon before. At least in terms of typing or the type of Pokemon it is, like species name or name. But with the advent of the DLC for Scarlet and Violet, Teal Mask, we have Ogerpon. And honestly, Ogerpon actually works really well for Shrek. Apart from, right out of the gate, it's an ogre. At least it's based off somewhat of an ogre. But it's also an ogre that does want to be a part of the world with people, but is mistreated based on a misunderstanding, based on, its appearances it has with the mask. So it's a Pokemon that actually represents Shrek more than just being a straight ogre. It actually fits more with his motif about how people don't look at him and say, run a dumb, stupid, ugly ogre. Add on the fact that the whole idea of ogres have layers. And that can go with the idea that Ogerpon uses multiple masks, which you can basically go with. Ogerpon has layers to it. So ultimately, yeah, I would say that Ogerpon is actually a really good fit. And despite the fact that it's feared, it's actually a very kind Pokemon, just like Shrek is actually a very kind person, but B, still extremely powerful, being a legendary, which, being an ogre, Shrek is still very powerful, can easily make mincemeat of most foes. It would take, you need to deal with like dragons and stuff to be actually easily overpower Shrek. Most other individuals aren't that one-on-one and stronger than Shrek, usually. But now we get into the remaining of the team. Now, this is where it got a little bit trickier because I wanted someone on the team that represented what he loves about being an ogre. So the first one represents his love of the mud, love of being dirty and filthy and all that. And I went with Clodsire here. It's a Pokemon that pretty much lives in the mud. It is mud colored. It is big and derpy. Now, Shrek's not big and derpy, but he is kind of big and round. But it's actually a pretty good Pokemon, too. Now, the poison type doesn't matter here. It is all about the ground and the mud. It's like mud clods. He just loves the mud. So I went with Clodsire for that. However, I also wanted to represent Shrek's appetite, palate, let's say. A Pokemon that can basically eat, that has a unique taste in food. Or, because Shrek, we see what Shrek eats when he's living on his own. Now he's more than capable and more than willing to eat normal food as well. Let's say, okay, right, as human-based food, like eating pig or whatever, or like just eat all that. But we see his diet, like he eats slugs, bugs. Squeeze the jelly from your eyes. It's good on toast. He's eaten eyeball jelly before. So Shrek as an ogre is clearly capable of eating a lot of different types of things. And I went with, and he's also a guy who enjoys just lounging. I mean, he's a pretty active guy, despite his, the way he looks. He's actually, I mean, he's in shape, but he's also a guy who just enjoys being lazy when he gets the chance to do so. So I went with Snorlax here, a Pokemon that is notorious for being hard to wake up, a Pokemon that can eat a massive amount of food in one go and doesn't really seem to care what it eats. So Snorlax, I think, actually works pretty well here for this representation. The last mon on the team, though, is the one that I knew I needed a mon to represent this. You can't have Shrek without Fiona. His ogre, not his ogre queen, but his wife, and the love of his life. So I actually immediately realized who I wanted this. It's pretty much, she is pretty much his queen. And you got Nidoking and you got Nidoqueen. And really, this is actually would be a really good mon for like a Fiona team or a Shrek team. Nidoqueens are very powerful Pokemon. They're not like legendary levels of powerful, but they're very strong Pokemon. It is the queen to his king. Now, he does not have a Nidoking on this team. That's because he is not the king. In fact, I'd actually say if I ever do a Fiona team, Nidoking would be on her team, whereas Nidoqueen is on his team, because they represent not themselves, but their partners and the person who makes them complete. So yeah, Nidoqueen, though, very defensive, a bulky Pokemon, pretty good. Can learn multiple different types of moves. It's a powerful mon indeed. But this team is probably one of the most unbalanced teams I've actually ever done. And the reason for that is actually really simple. There is one type when looking at all these mons that, assuming that we're sticking with the Ogerpon grass mode, which I would be sticking with the Ogerpon grass mode myself. That's the reason I chose the image I did. But assuming that we're doing that, there's one type when I looked through all of this that cleaves through all but Snorlax on this team, and that's ice types. Ice types completely and utterly destroy this team because both ground and grass types are weak to ice. And all of these mon are either grass or ground types or a mix of them, except for Snorlax, who is a bulky mon. It is extremely bulky mon, is immune to ghost types, is really only weak to fighting types, which is great. I think normal's also weak to rock, if I'm not mistaken. Let me double check that real quick. But even so, like, okay, it's got rock weakness as well. If I'm right about that, doesn't really matter. Yeah, if you're using this team in a run through or a playthrough of just about anything, and there's an ice type gym, you better have some coverage and make sure that coverage is golden because otherwise you are going to be having a problem, my friend. But yeah, actually, normal types, despite having no actual super effectiveness, are only weak to fighting types, and they do have one immunity, which helps balance them out a bit. So yeah, just to recap, we have Mud's Bray for Donkey. We have Florigato for Puss in Boots. We have Snorlax and Clodsire to represent the love of his life as an ogre. We have Ogre Pond to represent his ogre nature and the way he was kind of treated. And we have Nidoking to represent his beloved wife, Fiona. So that is the Pokemon team for Shrek. Let me know what you... Wow, that was a bad Shrek impression. I started good, then I just went, hey! Let me know what you... let me know what you think of this team. Do you like this team? Do you agree with this team? Or would you do something different? And if so, what would you do? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, though. Hope you enjoyed. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and I'll see you folks for the next one. Later.